on, everybody? It's Friday afternoon. Haven't done one of these in a long time, and I can't figure out why, but from my phone, it wouldn't let me retake the video or do any of the things that will help us analytically. So, this will probably be shorter than I intended. Hopefully, everybody has a great weekend. Hopefully, everybody had a happy Halloween. Um, Heard a wild story, and I don't know how true it is. I can't say that I've taken the time to go and research the validity of it or not. Um, but I read a story this morning when I finished work that suggested, anyways, that a wait for it here, a guy dressed up as Michael Myers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. By the way, this is more of like a Ask Me Anything Q&A, so we'll answer whatever questions come in, um, and we'll try to get to the ones that come in after we're done being live. But apparently someone dressed up as Michael Myers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, cut off someone's leg last night. Yeah. So, if there's any truth to that someone dressed up as the Shape cut off a fella's leg last night in Philadelphia, that's pretty messed up. Not great PR either. I think the thing that I find curious about that is, like, you really have no defense over something like this. Um, you, you know, I think if you dress up as Michael Myers any night and harm someone, you obviously have no defense. But when you dress up as Michael Myers on Halloween night and cut off someone's leg, you know, you're probably going to jail. And then some. So, couldn't believe what I was reading there. Again, I use reportedly because I've only seen it on social media. And, social media is an abyss. So, uh, I need to get some things off my chest here pertaining to the Halloween franchise and Star Wars franchise. While I'm on this drive, I'll be on the road for about 7 hours, but I'm going to spend about half an hour on here just venting, if you will. Um, so I'm going to start with Halloween. The month of October has come and passed without any sort of official announcement pertaining to anything about the Halloween TV series. Now, that does not mean, bloody disgusting or, several other, highly touted horror websites might not come out with stuff because they absolutely could. But I'm talking from an official capacity, meaning Trancas and Miramax, they had nothing to say month of October, which to me tells me, unless something leaks, they're not as close as probably a lot of people want them to be. And depending on what your expectations were for the series, I could understand you not being thrilled with that. When you look at the reports that came out several months back, they were also covered by 3C Films. They had a 2025 date attached. And myself and a couple others went on air and basically spoke about how everything we have heard, which is not a ton, this is not the Blumhouse days, um, specified there was almost no chance you would see a Halloween TV series on your screens by 2025. It just wasn't likely. The turnaround time was too quick, and you want to let things marinate and develop properly. Um, I'd read reports that they'd had Mike Flanagan at the top of their wish list, and clearly that's not going to happen because Flanagan has his hands in just about everything else going on in horror right now. Um, so 2025 was never particularly likely to me. I thought that was an outside shot. I've always looked at 2026, specifically the fall of 2026, to be the more likely obtainable date to hit for a release date, um, which is fine. You know, it's not that far off, less than 2 years. That being said, October is coming past, and there was no official announcement from Mirax or Trancas. And make no mistake, it benefits them to announce something like this during the month of October. Social media tracking, engagements, it benefits them to announce these sort of things in the month of October. Didn't happen. So that has me a little worried. Not too worried, but as someone that doesn't want to see the series get pushed back to even 2027, but knowing they intend to follow it up with a movie, maybe you get your series in 27 and your movie in 28. I'm not entirely sure on that front, but either way, October came and went, and there was no official announcement. Again, that doesn't mean another news site or even us couldn't get a hold of information and put it out there. But it has been quiet as a mouse. I would say that the front half of this year, January. Sorry about that. Driving in the middle of nowhere. We're going to have connection issues. Um, yeah, I think the rumor mill um, was just way more active in the front half of this year. There was more to go off of, and I and others expected it to pick up massively in the back half of this year, and it didn't happen. Um, hasn't happened yet. Keeping in mind the rights stuff for the Halloween TV series did not happen in October. They were hoping it would get finalized and done in October, but it did not last year. So it could be one of those scenarios. Wouldn't rule it out. Um, but what worries me a little bit here is off, but specifically if you spent in the production of any of the Halloween movies, cheap one or two, um, you know how big and disastrous of a roller coaster ride these productions can be. Um, you know, I'm hoping for the best. What's going on, Byron? Hopefully you're having a good Friday, buddy. Um, so I can only glance at my phone when I'm in, and I will be coming in and out like that quite a bit. Uh, simply because I'm in the middle of nowhere. So I don't know how the feed is. Not great from a message I got earlier. I know that. So, we'll see what happens. Um, anyways, where were we? Halloween, no announcement, month of October. Doesn't mean it's doom and gloom. Doesn't mean that things, aren't going well. But I do find it interesting that the first half of this year was far more vocal in the rumor mill. We were hearing things, people we talked to were hearing things, people far above us were hearing things and reporting on them. And then just silence, radio silence. And that to me usually means one of two things. One, something is imminent. Well, I think enough time has passed for us to confidently say nothing is imminent. Um, or two, they've hit a snag. And the two biggest things I kept hearing earlier in the year were, is it going to be a Loomis-centric story, or did they just touch on Loomis? Franchises seem to get into this frame of mind that they can't recast certain people. But to me, you can recast anybody, anyone, period. It's all about delivery and execution, right? What worries me, though, is Jamie Lee Curtis does this interview that's posted yesterday by Entertainment Weekly. And they posted on Halloween, the day. And they're talking about, other things, and they basically say, we can't not ask you about Halloween. And they asked her if there is ever a world where she might come back. I can't even believe we're having this conversation right now. And she basically said that, she hung up her attire and Halloween Ends was it. However, now being 65 years old, she has learned in her life to, don't rule things out and never say never. And I can't remember if this interview was done by James Hibbard, who does a lot of the Game of Thrones stuff, or not. But the whole never say never and then hanging up, ugh. Like, do we really need another Jamie Lee Curtis, not even led, but involved Halloween project? As a guy who was, part of a team that built this channel covering Halloween content, dating all the way back to when it was called Fandom Cantina and we were at Halloween 2018 TIFF premiere. I don't want it. I have so little interest in having another Halloween project driven by Jamie Lee Curtis. I don't. And I would like to think by this point in time that most of the Halloween fan base would be willing to say, maybe we don't need this. Maybe we can tell stories without Jamie Lee Curtis and Laurie Strode. And that doesn't mean Jamie Lee Curtis couldn't return and play a different character, but I still don't want that. She's got too much power. She openly admitted, hamstringing the production of Halloween Ends, and to a lesser extent, Halloween Kills. She played her Hulk Hogan creative control card. That's not going to work for me, brother. And I'm not going to sit here and make bold claims like if they did another Halloween project with Jamie Lee Curtis involved, that I wouldn't cover it or watch it. Of course I'm going to cover it. Of course I'm going to watch it. But in terms of my level of excitement and enthusiasm, I see your comment there. I'm Spooky Kitty. We're going to get into Star Wars here not too long from now. It kind of ties in with this a little bit, which is why it's a joint topic today. But I like, it's just not for me. I don't need a Jamie Lee Curtis Halloween project. And the fact that, she could be talking out of her ass or putting feelers out there. But to me, you won't get anything new, interesting, or exciting if you keep going back to the same well. Some people might go, well, Scream's going back to Neve Campbell. Well, guess what? Sidney Prescott hasn't fucking died. And Ghostface isn't one killer. So they can go back to that well. Whether people like it or not, we're getting another new timeline from this stuff. And even it gets old after a little bit. Huge Halloween fan. Ton of passion for the series. Love the month of October, September, even November. Had a blast taking my kids to an event. Had a blast taking them trick-or-treating. Had a blast doing the Halloween watch-alongs, which we got more of coming up. But for me personally, I'm not interested. I'm not vested in them doing anything involving Jamie Lee Curtis. It limits what you can do. I'm not saying Jamie Lee Curtis doesn't attract eyeballs or viewers or sell tickets or whatever, because to an extent she does. But if your franchise only works around Jamie Lee Curtis, you're in trouble. You're in a lot of fucking trouble. So I hope that there is nothing to her comments yesterday about never say never. Because I sure as hell don't want to see her back. I can think of a bunch of other people that don't want to see her back. And it's just time. It's time for a change. It's time for something else. And the TV series gave them their shot to do something else, to do something new, to do something different. And it still could. But Jamie Lee Curtis coming back? Not for me. Not for me at all. I'm hard-pressed to accept a story that involves Laurie Strode with anyone playing the character. But as I said prior, I think anyone can be recast. It's about how you deliver, how you execute, how's the story. I just hope at the end of the day that they're not falling for the trap of, well, it's Jamie Lee Curtis, got to give her what she wants. Because to me, that's just such bullshit. You don't need her to do this. But again, I'm not entirely sure where they are in pre-production of this thing, right? We don't even know who the showrunner is at this point. And that's a big deal. I don't think I even want her creative influence involved in the story of this. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure that Trancas and Miramax would love to tack on an executive producer, Jamie Lee Curtis and John Carpenter. But I gotta be blunt and say you don't need either one of those two to go out there and do a new, interesting Halloween project. Is it gonna have the success of the David Gordon Green trilogy? Probably not. But I don't think it's a necessity that you have those two back. I think if that's their way of thinking, and I'm not saying it is, but if it is, then they've already failed. Halloween Portal. Shift focus there for a second. Halloween Portal. we've heard of this website coming. At first, we didn't know what it was. They've been giving away like some stickers and stuff at conventions. The website officially launched on Halloween morning. So they did hit their rumored October release date. I know there were some rumors that we might have a news drop when the Halloween Portal website came out, and there wasn't really at all. But like, and I get it. I can be overly critical of myself at times, as hard as that might be for some people to believe. Um, but for me, when I sit here and look at this Halloween Portal website, which they have been advertising for months, not weeks, months, maybe half a year, maybe more. You know, you expect something half decent. The website goes online yesterday, and again, I'm probably coming across more like a Halloween hater, but I feel like we've always been subjective, with everything that we've covered here on the channel. Maybe if one of the guys were on right now, they could provide a little bit of different insight. But you have months to prepare for something. Months. And the website that they launched, which is supposed to be the new go-to place officially for Halloween fans, to put it plainly, it's just not good. It sucks. Like, it's bad. Um, you just, I don't know how you can advertise something for half a year and then put that out. There's nothing to it. The merch store is terrible. There's been little to no effort made with it whatsoever. The forums remind me of like the old run board forums and some of the other places that would have it. Like, horribly out of date. Um, it just, like, I wish I could even say it was half-assed. It it looks like a poor, pitiful effort on their part for whatever it is that they were trying to do with Halloween Portal. Now that can change, but usually you want your launch day to be effective. For example, we switched back to Phantom Empire here. Not everything's done. You go to the website or you go to the YouTube page, it still reads Haddonfield and Beyond. But we didn't have 6 or 7 months to prepare for it. Someone made a choice to go and do their own thing, and we had to sit here and contemplate, was it proper to continue on as Haddonfield and Beyond when we weren't going to be able to deliver on certain forms of content that we promised? Or was it better to go back and really restart up Phantom Empire again? And I don't mean what the channel was named for the last little while, but rather actually doing Phantom Empire Live weekly, actually having 3, 4, 5 of us show up, talk about things, have some fun, like we did during the pandemic and after the pandemic. And to me, it was a no-brainer idea. We might get less support doing the Phantom Empire idea, but at this point in time, I have more fun doing that, and it's definitely about fun, because you don't make nearly enough off of it, that's for sure. But the point is, I didn't have 6 or 7 months to change things. Had a couple of weeks, and we were able to get a new intro done and a background done, and this doesn't show up very well, but we're talking about companies like Trancas and Miramax who could put out something legitimate. And, I used to have this graphic designer buddy. He never worked on any of the Phantom Empire stuff. Frankly, I couldn't afford it. But his name is Rob. And Rob was fantastic at everything he did. He just gave such strong effort. Remember a movie poster he put together for us many, many moons ago. And it just looked great. And you look at Halloween Portal and you go, what are we doing here? What is the purpose of this? Because this is not a great look. So if I'm speaking about the Halloween franchise just pertaining to the last couple of days, it's a big, big fat L for me. Not that not getting an announcement done, that takes time. You don't necessarily want to be Star Wars, announce 10,000 things and never get to any of them. Hell, we've been guilty of doing stuff like that in the past. But that coinciding with Halloween Portal, coinciding with Jamie Lee Curtis's comments, for me anyways, it's kind of like the end of the road. It's like, okay, I've heard enough. I don't need to hear anymore. And it's time to move on, you know? Um, we'll see what happens. I don't think the Halloween TV series is not going to happen, but let's remember how long ago Crystal Lake was announced. And that show isn't cast. They have no material shot. They have changed their showrunner and essentially scrapped the entire story that was originally planned out. These are absolute things that could happen with a Halloween TV series. And then things get backed up even further. Whether it does or not, I'm not sure. Anyways, feel free to share your thoughts below on the lack of news on the Halloween TV series, on Jamie Lee Curtis saying, never say never. Share your thoughts down below in the comment section. I'd love to hear what you have to say. On to Star Wars. This part of the show will be significantly shorter. A Skeleton Crew trailer drops today. Watched it when I was done work this morning. And, it's not a bad trailer. It looks fine. But that in itself is kind of the problem. At least it is for me. Fine, to me, is not Star Wars. Star Wars should be held to a higher standard. And it's crazy because it's not like I'm spewing stuff out of my ass here and just making content for the sake of content. I'm talking passionately as a fan. There's 5 people in here right now. I wanted to leave. I got left, 25 minutes ago. I know people who were big Star Wars fans that we used to do some shows with that aren't at all. They've had the passion driven right out of them. They have no interest in it for the most part. And it's unfortunate because, the people that I'm speaking about were people that spent a bunch of their hard-earned money on Force Fridays, went out there and supported it, and spent years on a podcast. And it's difficult to have your passion driven from you like that. Um, but even watching the trailer, and I'm watching it, and my kid's on my lap, like, I didn't feel anything. I'm not excited for it. Like, as it gets closer, I'll be like, okay, cool, let's watch whatever new Star Wars is here. But it's not event television. It's not Game of Thrones. It's not House of the Dragon. It's not Succession. It's not The Last of Us. You know, it's not even the Rick and Michonne show that came out this year. And that's a problem. We should be excited at the prospect of new Star Wars. And we're not. And I can't think of a more devastating thing to say about any franchise than that. I mean, just go look at it. Look at the engagement. Look at the views. You know, 30 minutes after the trailer was posted, I think they were at 24,000 views on the main Star Wars channel. You go back to hell, Force Awakens, Rogue One, even The Last Jedi, and those views in 30 minutes on the main Star Wars channel are up near 1 million in that same amount of time. 1 million compared to 23 or 24,000. That is a 90+% drop off of traffic going to that main Star Wars YouTube channel. Not to, they can watch it other places, obviously, the Skeleton Crew trailer. But even the, not Twitter, but like the X mentions and the Facebook posts and people posting about Star Wars, it's not what it used to be. It's not even close. And like the way I'm talking about it, you would think that it's been gone for 25 years. It's not been. You know, it's been gone for, what was the last show even? Acolyte? A few months. Um, the problem is the product, more times than not, is somewhere between mediocre and bad. It's subjective. That's my thoughts on it. But yeah, um, I'm excited to take my kids to go see a Star Wars movie in theaters in 2026. I absolutely am. Um, but at the same time, the first movie coming is not what was supposed to be the first movie coming. And from what we know, it was supposed to be season 4 of The Mandalorian, which they've condensed and probably made some changes to make it its own movie, which will then lead into the Filoni movie. It's not a recipe for success, I'll tell you that. David Irwin says, I'd like less Star Wars shows and more movies produced by Jon Favreau, maybe a movie every 2 or 3 years to make it more epic. I think that you can have one Star Wars movie every year. I do. There was a point in time where I thought you could have more than one Star Wars movie every year. What you can't do is have a Star Wars movie about Broom Boy or a bunch of kids getting lost. People go on about no source material. You know, I forget who I was listening to the other day. Very popular Star Wars podcast. I listened to a couple of them. And, you know, they're taking the Kathleen Kennedy route of, oh, the lack of source material has really hurt them. But when you look at what Marvel has to play with and DC, they have all sorts of source material. Star Wars has a shit ton of source material, a metric shit ton. Walk into your local Barnes and Noble, Indigo, Chapters, whatever, find the Star Wars section, or just Google it. and you will see how much damn source material they have. It's a ton. I know some people will be like, well, it's Legends now. That doesn't matter. They can still inspire new stories. You don't think Marvel has made changes from what the literature is? They absolutely have. They're going to again with the new Avengers movies. The no source material excuse is exactly that. It's an excuse, it's bullshit, and the Gold Star Brigade never hold this franchise accountable for anything. Um, will clamor to it. And it's just like, how fucking dense can you be? I love Star Wars. I have a passion for it. I'm not going to be Star Wars theory and fucking go and virtually nuke people because their opinion is different than their own. But sometimes there's fact, and sometimes there's fiction. And saying Star Wars has no source material is a massive piece of fiction. Because they have a ton of it. And I don't know what the answer is for Star Wars, to be honest. You know, I'm excited for Andor 2, but the reasons I'm excited for Andor 2 are because of like production things. Tony Gilroy's in charge. He's not going to cop out. When you look at the quality of a show like Andor compared to literally almost anything else they've done, it's miles above the rest. More attention to detail, more love, more care. That being said, you lose most of your fantasy elements in a show like that. There aren't Jedi running around, and well, you might get a mention of the Emperor here or Vader there. It's still not a force-driven show, right? It's more of a political drama slash spy thriller, kind of like the earlier seasons of Game of Thrones, really. And you know that works for me. That being said, why don't you actually use some of the characters that you've built this franchise's back on? I'm not saying you can't create new interesting characters. I think you have an opportunity to do that with the Rey New Jedi Order movie if that fucking thing ever comes out. You can create new interesting characters in there to help drive that story and that era forward. But like, as long as you have Ewan McGregor who wants to play Obi-Wan Kenobi, Hayden Christensen who clearly is on board to play Anakin slash Darth Vader, why not use those guys? They're not going to be the driving force for everybody to come back, but it'll be a lot better than what you're serving out there. Like, newsflash here, I'm just going to be blunt. Here's a spoiler alert. The ratings for Skeleton Crew are not going to be good. The Acolyte had a chance because it was a Force-driven show. It was a Jedi-driven show slash Sith. But then they got into some of their carny nonsense. 25-minute episodes, things that don't make sense. It's just not event television. Ernie says Star Wars has been ruined. Well, it's hard to argue that. I think there's a path for anything to get repaired. I had this conversation earlier with a friend of mine, and he said, well, it's been interesting watching the death of Star Wars play out. And I'm not quite that drastic, but it is significantly less in the public eye than it was prior. And it's given less returns, which are both very bad things. I look at it kind of like you would look at sports, you know? If a hockey GM is failing year after year after year after year after year, same with a baseball GM or a football GM, basketball, sports GM. Their team's not getting the job done. If they are underperforming year after year after year, and you've brought in filmmaker after filmmaker after filmmaker after writer, editors, Dave Filoni's been promoted, all sorts of things. I would think that the natural conclusion would and should be that there needs to be a change at the top. You know, people have been on oust Kathleen Kennedy for years. People wanted Kathleen Kennedy gone the second The Last Jedi came out. Some people after Rogue One. But really, after The Last Jedi came out, people wanted Kathleen Kennedy gone. The problem with that, though, whether anyone wants to admit it or not, financially speaking, Rogue One and The Last Jedi were wildly successful financial films. Even critically, I do believe, on both of those fronts. But the fan response was poor. Divisive, to say the least. Eventually, you gotta have some fucking change. Eventually, you need to switch things up. Or go back to what was working. I think you can do almost anything you want with Star Wars and do it successfully. But lately, and I'm all for diversity and inclusion, I think those are great things to strive for. But I don't think it should be taken a precedent over storytelling. I think you're going down a slippery, dangerous slope the second you start to prioritize things like that over telling a fun, cohesive story with interesting characters. Usually with Star Wars, there's a character hook to get people in. But there just isn't right now. Look at what's in production. So you got Andor, which is going to come out next year. And at least it can go off of being wildly successful in terms of critic reception and awards and production quality. And I think it'll be all that. But it doesn't get me as excited as like a Force-driven story. Obi-Wan Kenobi may get a season 2, as Ewan McGregor said that they are talking again. And obviously Stuart Beattie's done some interviews recently where he's spoken about his movie trilogy proposal that didn't go forward. And like even the Obi-Wan character, I sit here and go, that's a character that you should be finding a way to utilize on the big screen. This isn't a story that's taking place on planet Earth. You can fuck with timelines, you can time travel, you can do whatever. You know, it's fiction, it's science fiction. Do something creative with characters that we already have that people want to see, instead of trying to ram characters down people's throats that they don't want to see. You know, I actually like Rey as a character in the new Star Wars movies. I thought she was decent. I thought as each movie progressed, she became a little worse. But I can be sold on, hey, Rey is going to be our main character or supporting character, and we're introducing these new characters in a new Jedi Order set 15 or 20 years after the Rise of Skywalker. I think you can tell an interesting story in that timeline. With the Filoni movie, it's really simple. It's the Empire versus the Republic, and Thrawn's involved, and I'm in. I'm sold. That one, I am sold. And that one, to be honest, probably requires the big three to do it properly. Now, whether they have the guts to recast the big three remains to be seen. But they should. You know, at this point in time, fuck the CG stuff, recast the big three, tell some stories set in there. there are ways out of this abyss that they've gotten themselves into, but it feels like someone towards the top is insistent on trying to dig their way out of the hole by repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again until they hope something sticks. That's a recipe for disaster. I can tell you that I heard someone talking, I think it was the Star Wars Newsnet people or the Resistance broadcast, and they were talking about how, well, now when you come out with a Rey movie a few years from now, the little kids that saw Rey when The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi and all those movies were coming out will be all for wanting to see her adventure continue and story continue. And here's the problem is, and I was in this bubble once upon a time too, I'm not now, is people caught in the diehard Star Wars bubble who don't look outside that bubble don't understand that there's no fucking kids watching. There's not. Do my kids watch a little bit of Star Wars? A tiny bit. Are they watching the sequel trilogy going, they want to see more? No. And I'm not just going off my kids, I'm going off of kids that I drive for. I drive bus, I drive charter bus on top of it. And it's like, I've seen the progression. There's not kids getting on the bus talking about Star Wars. There's not. They're talking about, Pokemon still, believe it or not, and Monster Jam, and hell, Ghostbusters. Where's Star Wars? There's next to no presence. These guys don't even have a semi-successful animation show out at the moment. And again, I'm not ready to say Star Wars is dead, because I don't believe it is. But I firmly believe unless you get change at the top, and yes, now I am talking about Kathleen Kennedy, it's time for her to go. Not because she's a woman, but because sometimes in the workplace, you need change. And if you don't get it, it's the same thing over and over and over again. And speaking of being over, that's what this stream is. It's over. Thanks to the handful of you that came out and listened to me rant and rave for a while. We'll be back Tuesday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, with another episode of Fandom Empire Live. There's an episode of Supernatural Revisited that I will hopefully get posted tonight. I did not get a chance to do it before I left on my drive here today. And Tuesday night's discussion will probably center around a lot of what I talked about tonight, but allowing other people to have a voice in it as well. Some plugs for people, though. Like I said, Supernatural Revisited's happening. That's Tommy and I's Supernatural Rewatch podcast. We have a Game of Thrones one that is currently in production. Some big Game of Thrones news came out yesterday that we will likely touch on Fandom Empire, and then Fandom Empire Live, that is, and then we'll yank that clip out, post it over on Legacy of Westeros. But it sounds like we may get a sequel to the main Game of Thrones show, but as a movie, or even a movie trilogy, or a series of movies. I don't know. But that's the recent report that came out yesterday. It's very, very early in development. But James Hibbert did, at least nod towards the possibility of it being a sequel to Game of Thrones, which I find interesting. And let's be honest, Warner Brothers is desperate. They need as many things as they can making money. But yeah, Supernatural Revisited, episode 3 will be out sometime here in the next couple of days. Episode 4 next week. We get back to recording episodes next week as well. We got 6 in the can at the moment. Phantom Empire Live, as I mentioned, on Tuesday. Got some watch parties coming up. Still need to schedule them in terms of when they will be. Really just looking forward to hanging out with everybody and producing some content, having a good time, not really worrying about numbers or anything like that. Excellent Halloween fan film out right now. The Last Nightmare, Part 1 by Braden Timmons. Please go check it out. I can't say enough great things about it. Definitely my favorite score from a Halloween fan film yet. They just did a knockout job on that. Congrats to Braden and his entire team over there. He worked really hard on it. But for everybody else at the channel, I'm Sean. We'll see you next time. Have a great weekend.